Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Mission Shunya podcast. Well, actually, it is the milestone 100th episode. And apologies for the long delay between the last two episodes. I was dealing with unexpected turn of events, but now things are under control and I'm behind the mic as usual. So let's go again. To make the restart even more special, we have a video shot for this episode. You can find the link in the description. But for all the audio-only listeners, don't worry, the audio version is coming up right after this. But again, I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss the video because of the efforts put in by collaborators Jacob and Kaushik from TerreGeneration. And yes, you can also see the face behind this voice in the video. So do check it out.
Hi Girish.
Hi.
Welcome to episode 100 of Mission Shunya.
Well, glad to have you on the show if I were to put it that way, but it looks like I'm on the other end of it.
You are on our show now. We are on episode 100 and we are hosting the host of 99 episodes in the Green Space. Congratulations Girish. You have done a wonderful job, and when we saw you doing it alone for so many years, we had to come and support you because we believe in the work that you do. You know, us being on your show actually has given us quite a few clients, so we know that people are listening and we know that you mean a lot to the world. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for your kind words as always. I'm glad to know that people are really listening to the show and there's a lot of feedback, positive feedback. I mean, because when you do something for a passion project, all you kind of appreciate is like positive feedback, because there's nothing monetary for either of us in this, but we just do it for the love of it, right? So it's definitely good when a lot of people appreciate the positive thing side of it. So glad to have you on the show today, you both of you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mission Shunya has done many episodes on renewable energy, plastics, forestry, a whole bunch of topics around how do we get to zero and hopefully beyond that as well. With me is Kaushik.
Hello.
Yes, glad to have both of you here, Kaushik and Jacob. And even when some time back, you actually brought out this idea saying like, hey Girish, 100 episodes is coming up, and all the listeners or people who follow the podcast know like TerreGeneration, and these are the people behind TerreGeneration. And of course your colleague Sumedha is also the artwork creator. So these are the people who put out the beautiful images that we kind of see on the show cover art. So thanks for doing that. And because you voluntarily said like, okay Girish, your cover arts need flip, so we can help you do that. So thanks for doing that. I'm sure like people who subscribe to episode 1, 2, 3, they would have seen like common art. Then after 10, and they would have seen Girish's some creativity. But then I think after some time they saw Jacob and TerreGeneration coming, they did see a big change. You got in a common theme. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we've gathered our questions from all our teammates.
Yes.
And we've come to you to interview you because we know that what you have in your head is going to be the best of 100 episodes. And now we are here with a list of questions to extract that for our viewers and listeners. And this is our first video podcast as well.
Yes, exactly. And first video podcast. And one thing about podcasting is like you talk to a lot of interesting people, talk a lot of interesting subjects, topics, and you tend to learn a lot. So I think I will be able to do justice to all your questions that you might have, because I'm not sure. But whatever I say is kind of fresh in memory, or whatever I can recollect. So hopefully I do some justice to that.
I promise you it's not going to be easy.
I didn't expect it to be, but so that's why I'm giving a disclaimer up front.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, and the aim of this episode is to be able to distill the best of the 99 episodes that you've shot so far, and so try to condense it into one really high-packed episode for the listeners to listen to.
Well, that's a good thing, because even it'll take me down the memory lane, saying like, oh, when was this topic?
Definitely.
Or what was this episode related to? So it'll be a good exercise, I'm sure. When we walk through this, it'll be good fun.
Yeah, it's a walk down memory lane for you.
Exactly.
For sure. Yes. Yeah, so why...
Are you ready?
I hope so.
So, Girish, question. Name 5 episodes and maybe organizations, startups, or non-profits in 5 specific sectors that you believe represent those sectors very well in the work that they do.
Okay.
And the topics are, it could be around food and water,
Okay.
or it could be forestry, it could be renewable energy, it could be plastic,
Okay.
and agriculture. So these are the 5 topics. And my question is, name 5 organizations and give 2 sentences describing them, maybe 2, maybe 5 sentences describing them, but what they do
Sure.
in these 5 areas.
Sure. I will do that. But yeah, again, a disclaimer, like this is because I've covered a lot of good companies, a lot of good entrepreneurs, people, passionate people doing their work. So every story is interesting. And so whatever I say now is just something that comes on top of my head at this moment. So of course, a huge respect to all the people who come on the show. And so let me just go to when you said renewable energy. One company that comes to my mind today is because of the topics that I've been reading is RE Connect Energy, and passionate entrepreneur. I've known the entrepreneur for quite some time because I work in the clean tech space. So Vishal Pandya and his team at RE Connect, they've been doing some good work. And this topic is something about like how they use data to kind of make predictive analysis of how projects, renewable solar, wind and other things could function, and how basically the grid is transforming. Everyone knows that there is more intermittent power like wind and solar coming into the grid. So again, this be sustained. So that was an interesting conversation. It was like how climate change is impacting wind patterns. So wind is already intermittent, but climate change is making even more worse. So that is one. If I can name another company is around using carbon dioxide as a battery source. Batteries are essential to kind of store renewable energy. So this company, Energy Dome, again, it's an early stage company, but getting a lot of good traction. They have been using this for long duration energy storage. That is another company. Well, just because I'm running down my memory lane, there's another entrepreneur, Harsha Kuntur. I mean, he runs a solar company called EcoSource Solar. Very passionate entrepreneur, I've known him. And he is really hands-on. He gets to communities, industries, and gets them shift to sustainable energy. So passionate people. Of course, I'm sure like when we do this, release this, we will put all the episodes that we are going to talk in the description so that people can go back and listen. So yeah, these are just top 3. If I go back the memory lane, I'll pick up.
Time out. Forestry, go.
Forestry, a few good companies. Say Trees again. Person, Kapil Sharma and Say Trees. I mean, Kapil Sharma, when I first spoke to him, he said like, I'm in the US. I'm saying like, but your organization is doing a lot of projects in India. How are you managing this? He said like, yeah, you don't really need to be in the place to do it. You just need to have good people in your team to do it. So that's something that, I learned from him, because how he manages a full-time role, but also spends his equal time and passionately building a team remotely. So Trees have been doing some phenomenal work. But of course, I can list a few more things. But
Ting, ting, ting. Food and water.
Food and water. Again, a lot of good companies are there. But one thing that I did recently is, again, there are 2 things that's coming. But let me go for an international one this time. Hungry Planet. Todd and his sister actually started Hungry Planet, Hungry Foods. So they were looking at meat alternatives, because meat production consumes a lot of energy, right? From having poultry farms, then growing your cattle, and everything consumes a lot of energy. So that is one of the energy intense sectors, and a lot of people are working around this. So Hungry Planet Foods, Todd and his sister, actually they said like, okay, we'll have to make it more fun.
Yeah.
So they did this by saying like, these are plant-based or non-cultured meat, but they're also done by chef. So good chefs come on saying like, hey, you can use these products and then build a cuisine around this. So that was a different novel approach. So that's something that interesting story in itself.
Right. Agriculture. Took the spotlight from
Well done.
Well, agriculture, in my podcast, a lot of people, entrepreneurs, just like you, who I've interviewed a lot of them. This one was again a person who said like, I'm fed up of my job. I want to do something unique. Let me go back. Let me come back to India. Let me do something. And he started this company called Edible Roots. He said like, they do our managed farms in India. They say like, okay, if someone wants to own a piece of land, but they don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of growing, they do that. But they also help like setting up community gardens and other things. Couple and Edible Roots is a good story that you should definitely check. They are also doing really well. Again, it's a top of my head because I spoke to him last year, but also attended a workshop recently with him. So that's
Fabulous.
Yep.
I'm going to take the last one because this is important to me. Plastics.
Well, plastics definitely. There again a lot of companies, a lot of stories, but the one that I'll probably tell is Kadir and Eco Hike. I'll tell it because this t-shirt that I'm wearing comes from recycled plastic bottles that have been recycled. So this is an entrepreneur who had a factory doing textiles. Then he said like, okay, I have to do something really sustainable, because again it's an interesting story of how he got into it, because he was doing a factory audit and people were asking like, what is the sustainability part of your business? Then he realized, okay, I can actually do something. So he took out plastic bottles, and now you also read like global brands are doing that. So this entrepreneur has been doing this silently for the last many years actually.
Okay.
So
I would love to know how they deal with the microfibers that come out of the t-shirt.
Exactly. That is something that they are definitely looking at it, because that is also another part. And generally, washing in general also has this lot of microfibers that come and they pollute the water, and a lot of companies are working on it. In fact, I'm talking to a few of them to kind of understand what they do, how they do it. Of course, all of these companies kind of they say like, we will do it at big scale, but eventually at every consumer end, this could eventually percolate and it'll happen. So that's
Interesting. Okay, moving on. Next question is, we want to know what sort of actions do you wish, like on ground, in laboratories, in government spaces, wherever it may be, what do you wish, like what sort of actions do you wish your podcast translates to?
I hope like everyone takes some small actions, because every action counts, but people just don't realize that it does. Like for example, I'll give a small example. Like everyone says like, I'm seeing kids doing Fridays for Future, climate action, protest and something. There was a guest who came on the podcast. He spoke about how his business was transformed because Greta and others were doing protest in Europe for every other Friday. So he said like, I was doing this Climate Partner as a company. So he said like, I was doing this business for quite a few years before this, but suddenly I saw an influx of inquiries. Even when I started presenting in conferences, people used to come to me and say like, I saw an increased number of participation from people and businesses. Then he said like, he actually asked a few people, why are you here now suddenly? I have been talking to your sector for a long time, but you were not responsive. But why now? He said like, my kid at home is asking like, I see this on TV, climate protest on TV. What are you doing about it? So then I have to go back and answer my family like, what am I doing as a owner of this business? So those are the kind of small actions that has a cascading effect. It will take time, but those will happen. So then governments will get involved. They will formulate policies, and so it's a good place to kind of observe this and see like every small action counts. That's what I tell people at the end of every episode. It's like, if you listen to something and if you think you can act on it, please do. You'll never know where it will eventually pay off.
Yeah, that's a good message.
Girish, which episode has impacted you the most? which one episode, no 7 episodes, which one episode has impacted you the most, and how did it change your life?
Well, again, I can tell a lot of episodes.
One episode.
Well, before I actually talk about that particular episode, I have to talk about TerreGeneration as well. Because, like, for example, when we spoke, Jacob, when I read about your story in media, basically in print media, and I said, like, hey, someone doing some activity in Kodaikanal is getting a huge amount of traction. But why is he doing that? Then when I got you on my podcast, I got to understand that your work has having a bigger impact. So you were really passionate about what you've been doing. And that is something that comes up with every other entrepreneurs. I mean, when people are really passionate and they do something, then you feel motivated saying, like, even your work, when you do it with passion, you can have a big impact. So, of course, Jacob and TerreGeneration is a good story that people should check. The other thing that I can say is...
Only one story. No, sorry, that you have to stop now. I'm joking.
Fair. The other one that I would say is close to what you have been doing is Neil Matthews. I've known Neil for quite some time. Very passionate person who does everything with a lot of energy, enthusiasm. And when he will just ask, like, I don't own anything in the planet. Like, why should I destroy it? He will just go about spreading this message in a very subtle way to people. And a classic case of what he has been doing is, like, he's built some good construction practices of how sustainable houses can be built with materials and things like that. So he gets a lot of people in to visit him and get understanding. And all this he does pro bono, free. So he doesn't make much money out of it. Unfortunately, a lot of people who take information from him have built businesses around it. But he does it. He's just happy to have a chat. He will explain every nitty-gritty with you. So you feel very happy when you, on a weekend, when you're doing a podcast, you feel like, what's the motivation? You're like, people like him are just like doing it for a long time. I mean, he says, like, I just need the basic things to take care of me and my family. But the rest, I don't own anything. So I just happily doing whatever I can. And if it helps you, it helps you. So that's a good person and a story.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure, go ahead.
So we come from a team which is actually majority women, and they're all busy this evening. Others, they would have been here as well. So we have a manel, which is one of the worst things ever. So I'm just going to request you, because this is a question from them. Can you name 2 women that have been an inspirational guest on your podcast? And they could be from India and maybe one from the world.
Sure.
I mean, this is the only question where you have the exception of naming more than 2 women. Go for it.
Well,
yeah.
I wish I could name a lot of them. One thing I can say, like, there are a lot of women entrepreneurs in this clean tech space. I mean, in my podcast, I look at the technologies. One is entrepreneurs who are solving a problem and they're doing it, like, really passionate about what they have been doing. So those are the things that I really look for. And I reached out. I mean, so this thing happens, like, when you reach out to a lot of people, when you talk, a lot of people, I mean, unfortunately, I have to tell this, like, a lot of women are not very comfortable talking about their idea or their technology, because even they're doing amazing work. I'm saying, like, you're doing amazing work. Will you be happy to come and tell? They're like, oh, no, maybe not. I mean, I get more rejections from them rather than from other. So that's one thing that I'm a little disappointed, but of course I had, like, amazing women, people who have done phenomenal work come on my podcast. 1 or 2, maybe. The first thing is, like, I can talk about Padma Shri Balram, normal person. I mean, she was just a normal lady living with a family, but then she realized, like, wastage, whatever she throws from her houses, was having a bigger impact. She just said, like, okay, why can't we deal with it better? After all, governments ask, like, you to segregate waste. I mean, I tell this on multiple episodes, like, segregating waste is a big thing that you can do, because when you throw trash out of your home, you just need to ensure the biodegradable and non-biodegradable is different, because entire value chain kind of helps with that. So she did that. She started with a small community residential apartment. Then she got others involved, like a local councillor involved, and she said, like, I'm helping these people segregate waste, and then that can come to your system, and then you can probably help it convert to, say, bio-CNG. And she actually converted that into biofuel, and the pilot project which she started sending it to a local restaurant, a nearby restaurant, for cooking fuel. So every waste that was coming from the nearby locality was converted into biofuel, and that was sent to a cooking restaurant. Then this got traction, and a lot of other resident apartment associations started coming forward. They said, like, it's a small setup, we can do it. So then a corporate was involved, Carbon Lights, another company. They got involved and they scaled it up in a big way. So small actions like that kind of have a big impact. And internationally, there have been women entrepreneurs. Like, for example, I can think of think tanks, people working in research. There's this episode that I did on Meet the New Meat, like what are the meat alternatives that I did. And there have been people who advocated for meat alternatives in their research. So that is an episode that I did long back. So Laura Wellesley and her team, they did something very interesting. They had some good findings in what are the impact of meat production, dairy production. So that was a good conversation.
One more.
Very early on, probably episode number 6, was Shailaja Rangarajan. Again, entrepreneur who found like problem in her old household, saying like, I throw a lot of waste, can't I do something with it? And then she's again got started with the local community, saying like, okay, let me try to do something with waste that I discard or people discard. And she started building products out of it, so upcycling. And this business started 5 years or something, and then it started scaling up. Then when you talk to her, you understand that her business is just not about products and upcycling. She then realized there are a lot of other women who are really skilled, technically skilled to upcycle products, like for example, discarded clothes, discarded jeans and other things, and they could probably make it better products, like for example, handbags or any dress material, clothing, and multiple stuffs. I mean, if you visit the website of Reimagine, you can see a lot of other products, like for example, multiple products. I mean, I personally kind of after the interview saw a thing and I got one for my wife also. So there are a lot of products that she does, and her thing was like this. I saw a lot of women who had skills and had to upskill them and say like, you can do this, please join me, do this. So her business is entirely like, even the social aspect of it is covered. So that's again a wonderful story. And now that it's been like nearly 4 years since I first featured her, the story is growing. Recently, I think she's also launching globally in Europe through another partner. So that's a wonderful story. So, I mean, people just start at home and then realize a home-based problem close to heart, then they scale it up. It's really good to hear. And few years down the line, when you look back at those stories, it's even more phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Girish. So next follow-up question for us is about the fact that you, over the 99 episodes that you've done with so many people, you have become a treasure trove of knowledge about tech-based solutions, innovative solutions, and EVs and all sorts of things. So I'm going to put you on the spot and I'm going to ask you to pick one such industry or company that you think has the potential to change the world for the better.
Well, I think if I point one, the people who came on my podcast will say like, hey, you picked the wrong one.
You can't say Mission Shunya.
I wish some few years down the line, someone will say like, hey, that podcast had a big impact on I wish that will be the case. But I'll just go pick the industry, because picking a company, picking a technology will be like thing. But industry-wise, I think a lot of things around decarbonization boils down to what is your source of energy. Like for example, when you electric vehicles, batteries, when you're driving an electric vehicle, we need the grid to be green. Like for example, more renewable energy in the thing. When you manufacture something, sustainable plastics or biodegradable plastics or anything that you manufacture, you again need energy that comes to be green. Yeah. So renewable energy has a big impact. Like if you are able to convert all the fossil fuel generation into green, clean energy sources, that will have a big impact on the entire decarbonization of everything that can come after that. So that is something big. And that's also probably the reason that I am in that sector working full time. So
we see nepotism coming. Yeah. Fair. Also, I like that saying, grid needs to be green. That's a nice alliteration to... That's right? Alliteration is the right word. Okay, yeah. So it is a nice alliteration to focus on. Yeah. So
I have something. You said net zero. Is net zero enough? And Yeah, just that's open question. Yeah.
Well, when someone asks me this question, it goes back to the conversation that we had. Regenerative. I asked you like, hey, Jacob, what is regenerative? And I think you said like, hey, getting to zero is not something that we want. We had to add more than that. So going beyond zero is a thing. But, well, of course, the big thing is like, how much of resources can you give back? So that will be the ideal case. But honestly, I mean, we know like the realistic case is to not exploit more resources. Not exploit more resources is the ideal case. Like, for example, to get to, say, limiting the temperature rise to 1.5, 2 or whatever it is, the ideal case to at least not exploit more resources so that we don't make it worse. We just preserve the status quo. I think that will be the first ideal case. But I'm sure with the penetration of technology, I'm sure it can go, as you said, regenerative or even beyond zero. But that'll be a best thing to happen. But getting to net zero, I think, is the first milestone that is itself aspirational. So I'm sure that's a good, at least, benchmark to get there.
Yeah, I have to disagree with you because I think that's too low a target. It's too low a target for what to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like entrepreneurs like you, that is something that you have a good thing, which is true.
Yeah.
But as a consumer, when I look at it from the consumer and when I look at the audience to whom I am talking, when I say like, hey, your small action can actually reduce your, say, for example, energy use in the entire grid by like 0.001%, they'll be like, okay, maybe I can do that. Hey, by not taking your vehicle for 3 days out of 5 days, by, say, taking a public transport, you can have a big impact. They'll say, okay, let me do that. So when you have to nudge people in that direction, when you have to nudge the consumers in that direction, saying something like this is fine. On the other side, when you build the narrative, like you are a communications expert, when you try to build the narrative and saying like, hey, when you drive an electric car, charging it through batteries put on your roof, I mean, people are like, hey, that's too far-fledged for me. I am not going to do that. So, yeah, ideal case is getting beyond that. That is essential. But how do you get everyone involved? So, with that objective, I think, saying like, hey, you can reduce it. Energy efficiency is first. But then you drill down and then people, when they understand more, actions can happen.
Thank you. I just wanted to share something that I've been practicing. Like, for instance, and there are carbon footprint calculators for flights,
correct,
specifically, that are available in a number of them online. One of them that we follow calculates the carbon footprint per seat from Bangalore to Delhi as 0.7 tons, and which is an equivalent of 3 trees. They don't say whether it's high sequestering or low sequestering. It's just a generic tree. 3 trees where the life of it has been preserved for 3 years. So then after that it grows. And so so 3 trees is net zero, basically, because you're offsetting the carbon you're burning. But 4 trees starts becoming sustainable if you plant 4 trees. And 5 trees is even more sustainable. So that's just, when we break it down to numbers like that can be very easily communicated. Yeah. It's quite actually easy to mobilize people where they say, okay, I'm going to calculate my flight to New York, and there's some 22 trees, high sequestering trees, or 120 plus low sequestering trees. So you're able to do that math, and then you can offset your footprint in a net zero way, yes, but more in a regenerative way. Yeah. Just sharing that, yeah.
No, that's definitely a valid point. And rightly, as you pointed out, that's good. That, as you said, a lot of people are, in fact, a lot of travel companies are actually building out the carbon footprint into their systems to show like, hey, you're booking this flight, you can also offset this. I think a lot of people
greenwashing.
They are trying to.
I didn't hear that. What did you say?
They are trying to integrate that. I was going to get that, but I just felt like people are trying to, because we'll have, now that you mentioned greenwashing, we have to bring this, because the other point is like, people say like you can plant 5 trees, get beyond zero. But actual thing is like, who's planting the trees? Who's verified whether the trees are really... Because when you plant trees, like, you can plant a tree and 1 week later if the tree dies down, there's like no... The next thing is like, you going to plant the tree, you would have spent more energy than it kind of sent. So these validations are really going to be the next big thing, because carbon markets is something that's going to come up in a big way. People say like, okay, everyone's going to offset. Offset is the easy word. Businesses, people, everyone wants to offset, saying like, I'm taking action. So as you said, greenwashing could be a thing. A lot of people have to really go on ground and see, hey, is this really happening? So that'll be a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is actually something that I realized while asking the previous one, is that this is the 100th episode. Now, why don't you tell us about your journey to the 100th episode? What were the highest points in the episode, and also what were the lowest points? Because I think the audience needs to know both. So, yeah, on to you.
Well, thanks, Kaushik. I mean, when you ask this journey, it's a lot of up and down. But the journey for podcasting actually didn't start with this. It started basically right when I started working in the clean tech sector, building solar power projects. Then I used to tell people like, hey, I'm working in solar power projects. People are like, oh, are you putting the solar water heaters on roofs? I said like, no, we are building large power plants and that they're going to come up. So 2011, people kind of didn't realize that scale would really pick up so fast. The last 10 years, that's a phenomenal growth that I'm literally seen in the sector. So then I started writing about all my experiences, like what goes into building projects, started doing a blog. Then it eventually transitioned into, because I was a podcast consumer myself, so I started doing that. Then I was working with my ex-boss, who was also passionate about this, Rahul Vallavalkar. There's an episode with him also. So he was also very keen on podcasting, so we did the initial podcast with him. So, but that was looking at the big picture, looking at policymakers, and then asking them to change, talking to them and doing that. But I was more interested in saying like, let me again go back to the consumer level and talk to them and saying like, hey, you need to understand the big picture, but there's also something that you need to say like, okay, I can do this action and I can still make a positive contribution. So I wanted to build that kind of narrative. So that's when I got started with the second podcast, Mission Shunya. Been 4 years now. I mean, it's been very tough. One thing is like being consistent when this is not your full-time thing. Yeah. Full-time, I've been working all through. So, and yeah, of course, all people who I've worked have been really supportive because they know I also write blogs, I do podcasts. They know that, and I keep to do it on weekends. So weekends, doing this on weekends, there's a lot of things that you have to sacrifice. There's a lot of time that you have to devote. And for this, of course, people have to be supportive in your near friends and most importantly, family. Especially during this period, I also got married. So after that, wife, Premishri, I mean, she actually has been more of a support in this. In fact, we have a lot of discussions around sustainability at home also. And especially when we go to events, we talk about that. And in fact, like for example, we did a couple of episodes on saying like, what are the sustainable practices that we are following and what got us there. So we did few episodes. She joined me. She was very supportive in that. And in fact, on some weekends when there was a release or something, I asked her to do the editing on the weekend. So that's been like a good support. And on that front, support and things. On the other end, like for example, industry people who came on the show, they have also been very supportive. Like for example, episode number 33, if I'm right, I got Jacob on the show. Yeah. 70 episodes, nearly 70 episodes later, Jacob sees like, okay, we can actually work together and we can do something that can have a bigger impact for both of us. I mean, both of us are learning in the process. And in fact, in between that, you have also been kind to introduce me to a few other people who have been doing. Vanantara was a classic case, who have been doing good work. And that's also a good story to cover on the show. And I had this experience with multiple guest on the show. They said like, hey, I listened to this, it was interesting, but I think you should also talk to him. He's also doing something interesting. I think that will add value to your audience. And this learning, I mean, it's like one good thing is about learning about new technology, talking to a lot of people. I mean, I literally use this as my podcast, as my like visiting card to reach out to anyone. I say like, hey, I do this. Would you want to talk? And even if they want to say no, they say no. Yeah, they say like, I know you have done 100 episodes, so you are serious about it, but you're doing it in passionate part-time job, so you're serious about it. So they are at least politely say no. But it's fine. So it's been fun and it's been a good experience also.
Yeah. And I'm going to probe you to talk about your lows once you've done the podcast.
Well, there are definitely lows in the sense I enjoyed the process since I've been technically doing podcasts since like 5-6 years now, including the first one. The process, I know it's time consuming, it demands a lot of energy, but the lows have been like when you look at the numbers, when you go to fellow podcasting meetup and say like, hey, I do a sustainability podcast, and when I meet people who have been doing in different genres like travel, arts, horror. So I mean, those people get some phenomenal sponsorships and they build a big network. And for someone like sustainability podcast, the numbers, I mean, how many people listen to the podcast and things like that. Early on, that was like a factor that I saw and say like, hey, why isn't it really growing? Then I said like, hey, the growth has been happening the other side. Like I'm learning a lot of things. So I should not focus on this metric, but rather look at the other metrics that are really happening.
That's interesting.
So technically looking at podcasting numbers was definitely not a thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that, because we are also struggling with qualitative versus quantitative metrics, and like the quantitative metrics for, let's say, sustainable Bollywood podcast will be very high, the quantitative metrics, and a sustainable cricket podcast will be very high, but like qualitative metrics, I think is really the thing that I think we thrive on. I think.
Exactly. I think that's also a factor that we have been able to collaborate. I think both of us, it's just like, okay, you support me, I saying like great artworks and give, and I just use it for free, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that we have monetary transaction, but both of us know like, hey, the message that we are conveying in through the medium is reaching a wider audience.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and we're very happy to support you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the spotlight away from Jacob because this next question is very personal to me. What's something that's been bugging me is the buildup of eco-anxiety. There are a lot of young listeners who will be joining your podcast as new listeners. There are older audience members who are also young listeners. And I think this is the concept which is very prominent in the newer generation, which is eco-anxiety. So I want to understand... because you've spoken to so many people, how do you see the use of tech-based solutions as a way to alleviate this sort of eco-anxiety that's building up around climate change, around the current state of the world, all of it?
Interesting that you talk about younger generation. So when you talk about them, is it because you feel that they thrive on instant gratification? Do you think that eco-anxiety builds on from that?
I wouldn't say instant gratification. I feel like... the recent news that's just been outside, right? Constant flooding news. There are earthquakes in Turkey. Whichever sort of geography you pick, there's something bad happening in terms of climate change that connects to climate change. Oil companies are pouring more and more money. Banks are pouring more and more money into oil companies. Stuff like that is happening, right? And this sort of news is very depressing to look at. And also, just like, I think the younger generation is way more exposed to this sort of information. Like, I can't remember, there are people who are 15 years old who are starting climate movements. They're following, they're creating these pages which are supposed to talk about climate change and stuff. At 15, I don't remember doing anything like that. And I consider myself to be on the younger generation. I feel like the generation that's younger than me is even more anxious about the climate. So I feel that is a very important issue to talk about, because that's basically what's on kids' minds. I don't think that's a good thing, right? So I just want to understand if you see technology as a tool to alleviate this sort of anxiety.
The reason I asked the follow-up was because of this. Because a lot of younger generation people kind of see, because they kind of look at instant gratification, attention spans are low, and it's just a psychological thing. They don't look at the big picture. I mean, only, of course, a lot of people, as you said, they go read into depth. If you are really into it, they would probably say like, okay, I read about this company, a big oil major investing in this. But then they would also go dig deeper into reports, and they find like, hey, this oil major has also invested in a few green companies. So maybe 10 years down the line, those green companies could actually do something better. Or this oil major would probably run out of business in oil.
That seems very unlikely. I guess it's a sad truth, but it seems very unlikely.
But there are a lot of people kind of do that study also.
Yeah, fair.
Generally, when I talk to people and when I convey this message through the podcast medium, I say like, hey, technology is a big enabler. Yeah. It is definitely making things. And as we spoke about it earlier, on-ground action is what matters. This is not something like software product. You build something, 2 months, you know the result. It's going to scale up and everyone's like, hey, we have solved the problem, or it's not going to happen. It's going to be on-ground effort, and technology generally takes time. And we need new technologies to come up and solve all these problems. So
Climate GPT.
Yes. Well, you can talk to an AI and find out more reasons to say like, how can you live a sustainable lifestyle? It'll look up and say like, hey, you can do this. but ultimately you have to take action, right? So that is a big thing. And for example, electric vehicles, people generally say like, I buy an electric vehicle, but still the grid is not green. Yes, the grid is not green today, but there are a lot of projects that have been built, and it will eventually turn greener. So technology definitely takes a long time to kind of get to a level where adoption then scales up and you solve a lot of problems. So anxiety is there. It's really concerning because every other day on the other side you're fighting against climate change, and the disastrous effects of it are clearly visible. You have heat waves coming, and when you read like heat waves having a significant impact on everything else, like for example your food systems, that's a new study that's saying like because of that production yields are going to go down, but you have population rise coming up. So this is definitely, anxiety will continue to be there, but technology will definitely get there. So it takes time, but optimism is the way forward.
Yeah, it is actually holding on to hope is the only thing we can do at the end of the day, apart from of course working on it. Okay, so I actually want to do a callback to one of your previous episodes, which is that in one of the episodes, which was basically a recap of the 2010s, you made some predictions and you reviewed the kind of trends that have been followed globally. So that episode was in 2020. It's been 3 years. So is there any change in your perspective on predictions for the future?
Well, yes. When looking at that, when I'm thinking of that, I think when I spoke about it, it was more about getting energy access, getting a lot of people out of poverty, and then kind of providing them sustainable livelihoods and sustainable development that's been happening globally. But when I look now, 3 years, we have been through the pandemic years and war out of nowhere. So a lot of things have changed, definitely. A lot of focus now has shifted to around making companies more responsible. So companies have said like ESG is going to be a metric that we are going to adopt. So that is going to be a conversation that's definitely going to think. And people are definitely going to talk about closing the loop, because supply chain disruptions have definitely got people thinking like, hey, we can't leave this to everyone from global supply chains, won't work. Especially the pandemic and the subsequent war has taught people like global supply chains not going to work, get it localized. You see countries, US, European Union, everyone saying like, do everything for this market in this region. So when they do that, they have to close the loop invariantly. So because you have to source it there, you have to recycle it, you can't ship it out to say like early days. I think we spoke about it some time back also, like someone shipping out waste from US to China. So China said like, no, we don't want this. We are not going to clean your waste here. So this is going to happen. That's a good sign. And carbon, something that we spoke about, people are going to talk about carbon offsets. But most critically, people are going to say like, is this really happening on ground? So those are things that definitely optimistic. But let's see, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, so I think I want to talk to you about one of the episodes. I mean, one of the predictions that you had made in that episode, which was about banning single-use, about the prediction of single-use plastics being banned over the next decade. While I'm hopeful of that happening, I wish that could happen too. I myself am very skeptical about it because, I've seen the number of attempts being made to ban single-use plastics from the customer end, to reduce the use of it first of all, but it's never worked. It's always come back. So what do you feel about that one aspect of your prediction?
Well, I'm glad that you picked that single point. But when I did that also, I felt like that's not going to be the case. It could be close, but interestingly, a lot of plastic alternatives are coming up in the market. One, of course, the government regulation is kind of more strict in all markets globally. Everyone's trying to ban single-use plastic. They're making it hard for people to get access to it. Right, for example, stores are not giving out plastics for you to carry. Even for that matter, straws. In your restaurants, you don't get that in plastic anymore. Even like any markets, you don't get that. So when they're making it difficult for that, it's definitely a good sign. But the other thing is to make the alternatives more competitive. So that will eventually phase the other things. Like, for example, I featured a couple of episodes where like water-soluble plastics, and that's a good concept. But again, this is a shift that will happen because you need to change the entire value chain or the entire manufacturing value chain to kind of make alternates fit into their system. Like, for example, if someone says my novel chemistry can work and it can replace plastics, it doesn't do it at this instant. It will have to change the entire value chain. So that is happening. But it's an optimistic guess, but I hope it happens. One is the regulation, one is consumer awareness, and most importantly, have better alternatives. So that will, let's see, but I'm hopeful too.
Okay, this is going to be a tricky one, Girish.
Okay.
If you were going to bet 10 lakh rupees or 1 million rupees on any one company in the sustainability, regenerative, net zero space, which company would that be?
Well, I would probably bet it on myself.
Nice try.
But this is actually an interesting question because and it comes out in a nice time when I'm reading about this company called EnergyX. That's why I think this is an interesting question, because when I spoke to T. Gigan from EnergyX back in early days, 2019, the company was just having a novel concept. This came over from a lead and they said like, hey, someone knew me and they said like, you should talk to this person because I'm the agency for that. They got this company. Then I spoke to the founder and said like, what is your technology? Lithium extraction. What do you do? It was an early conversation. So all my podcast, most of it, if I'm talking to someone new, I have this initial conversation to understand if they are the right fit. And then I do the actual interview recording. So when it was sounding novel. So lithium extraction in a novel way to extract lithium, which of course lithium batteries for EVs is going to be a big thing. So this company had a novel thing that said like, we are in scientific readiness level. I think it was very low at that point. They were just doing pilot. He was just visiting facilities in Bolivia to kind of understand this. They had spoken to a university and they got this license transferred and everything. So when I thought like, if I had this money, then I would have probably bet in that company. But the reason I say that is because recently, last week, I think General Motors committed like about 50 million, and this was in addition to few other players who have committed some funds into this company in the last 6 months to 8 months. So
I don't 50 million rupees or dollars?
Dollars over a period, I think, if I'm right. Yeah. But that's an interesting company. So I mean, so the podcast has also grown and this company is also grown. If I had this money and bet, I would probably...
There's some relation there.
So that's how unpredictable things are. You never know. But you just hedge your bets if you were given the chance. So that's why I said like I would probably bet on myself, saying like maybe who knows what happens.
Go on, Kaushik, take the next one.
I think we are close to wrapping up the podcast recording. So we want to understand, what do you see Mission Shunya talking about in the 200th episode? We are aiming far into the future. Maybe not even that far. Might not even be that far. So.
Well, the first thing I hope is like we managed to do this consistently again. Yes. Since this is going to be a passion project and a weekend activity, I hope the consistency kicks. But more importantly, have more content that is impactful, because we have a lot of content now. It will be good to distill the content, bucket it under different themes, and maybe get few more videos up and running. So that will be the way we produce content, good quality videos, distill it to audience. But more importantly, on the topics, passionate people, a lot of passionate guests will definitely come. And topic-wise, I think a lot about energy is definitely going to be there. But more importantly, emerging topics like, say, for example, carbon offset, ESG. And I'm sure all these topics will be really relevant in the next few years. A lot of people are going to understand this, is going to come and back. And they'll be more keen to listen to it. But of course, then the perennial things of plastic, pollution, recycling, upcycling will continue. The one good thing about sustainability or the net zero thing is like I can talk to a lot of people. Everything can be bucketed into the sustainability aspect of it. And that's the fun part. But it's also challenging because you need to pick, like after 100, it's like you need to raise the bar, produce more content, more relevant content. So that'll be the challenge, I think. But hopefully it goes well.
Yeah.
Sector-wise, I just want to also request for more conservation-related topics and between episode 100 to 200, because conservation is deeply linked with climate change.
You brought out this because recently I've been reading about that also, kelp planting, and so I think a lot of investors are doing into that aspect of planting more kelp and doing that. But as you said, a lot of other factors are also involved. Conservation. I did try reaching out to a few people, but we never got into conservation. But the other aspect is because of the podcast production happens in English, and a lot of people on ground typically speak the local language, so they also have this initial reluctance to kind of come and speak. But yes, as you rightly said, I think I have to be more on ground. I have to squeeze in more time in my weekends to go on ground and talk to people. And I think that's where I think I can also do some podcast videos. I think that's a good feedback. I'll work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on our show, Girish. It's the 100th episode. Thank you for having us to host you. It's been a real privilege and honor for us. Because we are big supporters of what you do and the commitment that you have shown to this kind of work. Thank you for doing what you do.
Hey, thanks Jacob, thanks Kaushik, and thanks for taking time to kind of actually initiating this, I should say, when you said like, hey, your 100th episode is coming, let's do something. And we just started a few iterations and we managed to do a video. And again, it's interestingly, the place we are sitting at again is a community friend who's also fellow podcaster, Chetan. It's all gelling up because this journey has given not just in the sector but outside of it as well. So it's a wonderful experience, and I think you grow in the process. Thanks. Wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been a wonderful pleasure, and it's very fantastic kind of to run down the memory lane. In fact, looking at talking about all the episodes, and I think I probably missed a few episode numbers. I didn't put it in the right sequence, but definitely people who, when they watch this video, we will give this in the description. So the show notes section will have it in the description, so they can go back, listen to that. And of course, there is no video for that. It's all audio. Yeah. And of course, for all the audio fans, this will also be produced in audio version also. So definitely check the links, and sure, the contents will be wide, so you'll have more people tuning in.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for taking time to do this interview.
Yeah.
That was a wrap on episode 100, a good walk and talk down the memory lane. Thanks again to Jacob and Kaushik from TerreGeneration for the support and collaboration as always. Yes, subsequent episodes will be coming up sooner than you can imagine, so stay tuned. Thanks for all your support and love. Until next time, this is Girish Shivakumar signing off, and as always, thank you for listening.